Yeah, great stuff. Yeah, I see you, Reva. Maybe the other one just has to be switched off there. Maybe just switch the phone off. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. All right. Phew. Okay, so Temple Israel, Hillbrow, Johannesburg, South Africa, welcomes you to nearly the conclusion of our wonderful lessons with Lael Bethlehem, learning how to read those amazing Hebrew alphabet letters. Over to you, Lael. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Reva. And hello, everybody. I hope everybody is okay. It's not, we seem to be in a very volatile time, and lots of people are dealing with difficulty, real difficulty. But I just want to say, I hope everybody's okay. One of the points of learning to read Hebrew is so that we can learn, to read the prayers. And because those prayers, aside from anything else, are texts that give us connection to Hashem, to each other, that give us comfort, that enable us to withstand more easily the difficulties that are, I don't know, I guess just inevitably part of life. So Harriet has apologized. Casey has just said she's about to join. And anyone who is with us is very, very welcome. May I say I'll be away hiking next week. So I guess there won't be a class next week, and then we'll meet again in 2 weeks' time. So, and then we'll already be into November by then. So I think we should carry on meeting until the end of November. And I very much hope that what we're going to do tonight is we're going to get onto the last chapter. We might not finish it, but we're going to get on to lesson 9. And lesson 9 is the Shva, the one that we've been sort of looking forward to, the silent vowel. And then after that, really, it is a matter of practice. So when I say a matter of practice, that doesn't mean it's not anything. Practicing is very important to consolidate what we've learned. It's like maths. You can be shown that the operation works like this, but if you don't practice it, you just can't do it. And then in 3 weeks' time, you've actually forgotten how the thing works. So we do really need to practice, but at least we will have gotten through the Shva. So,
Lael, do you know what Gary Player used to say?
No.
The more you practice, the luckier you get.
Oh, lovely. Very nice. Very nice. So I tell you what, I did ask everybody for homework to look at pages 66 and 67, but rather than going over them, because I think if we go over them now, we'll probably end up spending most of the lesson doing that. So what I'd rather do is just let's try and get through lesson 9, or at least part of it. And then in 2 weeks' time, we'll get on to consolidating, starting with pages 66 and 67. So with your permission, I am going to start lesson 9. For those who have the book, it is on page 69. It is a rather fascinating little linguistic device, and that is the silent vowel. So unless anybody would like to say anything, I'll just pause a moment, then off we go. So here we are with the vowels. So these are the vowels that we've learnt. We've learnt a and a, e and e, a and a, o, u and u. Those are the vowels that we have learned. Any questions about the vowels? You remember the o on top of the stick, on top of the vav, and the o by itself. You remember the u in the tummy of the stick, the vav, and the u, 45-degree angle underneath. So those are all of the vowels, and you've now learned all of the letters, except now for this very last vowel, which they call a silent or short sound. Now, as you know, I've got my sort of issues with the book and the way it explains things. So I'll cooperate with the book up to a point, and then I will depart from the book a little bit and disagree with it to some extent. But the main thing to tell you about the silent vowel. So the question is, why on earth would you have a silent vowel? And the answer is because sometimes you need to hear the sound of the letter just by itself without a vowel. That's the first answer. So instead of saying la or li or le or lo or lu, sometimes you just want to say le. You just want to say le. Now, I was trying to think actually when I was preparing for the class in English. I don't know, would you ever just say the sound of the letter without a vowel? Would you ever say le or b? I couldn't actually think of an instance where you would. Maybe somebody here will think of one, but the point is, sometimes in Hebrew, you want to be able to say the sound of the letter without attaching a vowel to it. And the way that I always think of it, I see Brian's joining us. The way I always think of it is, do you remember in grade 1, when you learned all of the letters, your teacher said to you, this is an L, and it makes the sound L. Hello, Brian, you've joined us. Very happy to see you. It makes the sound L. So they took us through the whole alphabet, and they said, here is a B and it says B. Here is a C and it says K. Here is a D and it says D. Same thing in Hebrew, that what the shva allows you to do, particularly at the beginning of a word, is to say the sound of the letter. L, M, D, K, Sh, M, S. So just think of it as your grade 1 class. Say to yourself, this is the letter, and what sound does the letter make? And the job of the shva, of the silent vowel, is to just allow you to voice the sound of the letter without attaching a vowel to it. So my problem is that they then, by using the words that they use here in English in this book, they immediately contradict themselves, because it's not lagoon or maroon, it's lagoon and maroon. So please, those of you who have the book, just cross out the ma and the la. It's not lagoon or maroon. It's lagoon, maroon. And how do I know that it's la and ma? Because I'm voicing the sound of the letter lamed, la and ma. If I go on to the next line, devar. How do I know that it's de? Because that's a dalid, and a dalid says de. Devar. Ketav. How do I know it's ketav? Because what does a kuf say? It says k. Ketav. Then this lovely important word here. What is this letter? It's a sh. It's a shin. What does the shin say? It says sh. What is the word? Shema. 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 Mechal. Kelal. Selach. So you'll notice that they also make use of the word slurred. And sometimes the sound of the letter does get slurred, it kind of merges into the rest of the word. And you're going to say to me, but when does it slur and when does it not? And I'm afraid to say I can't tell you. There isn't actually a rule. It's just that when you've got ketav and shema, in practice, the word shema becomes shema, 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 shema. Whereas in the case of ketav, you still hear it as ketav, ketav, devar, devar, ketav, shema, machal, kelal, slach. So as you get to work with the shva, you will see that sometimes you sort of actually pronounce the sound de, ke, sh. And sometimes, even though that's what you're doing, you're giving the letter its sound, sh, you end up sort of slurring it into the rest of the word. And there isn't really a rule for that. It's just what happens in the course of the language. And what's nice for us is that we are mostly learning Hebrew for the sake of the Siddur. And in the Siddur, it will become obvious to you. So this is the word Shema. Shema. If you said Shema Yisrael, you would be right. It says Shema Yisrael. but in practice, it becomes Shema. So what you'll see is that as long as you keep that in mind, this is the silent vowel. It allows you to voice the sound of the letter. Then you will see in time when you are saying katav and when you are saying Shema. I'm afraid I can't offer really more than that. But that is the main function of the Shema, is to allow you to voice out the sound of the letter. Now, this book makes quite a song and dance about what happens when the Shema is at the end of a word. And they have a kind of a rule for it, which says that it's not pronounced at all. And yes, you can see it that way. And in a way, it's perhaps just a different way of saying, I might say it differently, but let's just see what happens when the Shema is at the end of the word. So there's no, so this is Bach. It's not Bach. Really, it should be. It's not Bach. It's Bach. It's not Shat. Shat. It's Shat. At the end of a word, or indeed, as you'll see, at the end of a syllable, it just is there to pronounce a stop. Bach, Shat. And then if we go on, Lach, At, Charat, Elech, Mat, Mimech. So these shvas that are all at the end of the word simply disappear. And then when the shva is in the middle of a word.
Lael, can you go back and read the third word on that last line? No, the other way. No.
This one.
Oh.
That one.
No, the third one, the one before that. You didn't pronounce that letter. Yes. What is that?
Charat.
Oh, charat. I didn't say the R. Thanks. Okay.
So, Lach, At, Charat, Elech, Mat, and Mimech. So because the shva plays a slightly different role, its use can kind of differ a little bit. What the book tries to do is it tries to come up with a hard and fast rule, which you've then got to try and remember. Like, what is it when it's at the end? What is it when it's in the middle? What is it when it's at the beginning? I don't really like that idea of trying to get the shva down to a rule, because I think it's actually quite difficult to understand their rule. And also because I think really the point about the shva is that its use is somewhat flexible. It's there to be a silent vowel and to allow, the overarching thing about the shva is that it is there to allow us to use the sound of the letter without attaching a vowel to the letter. So even here with lach, if your shva wasn't there, you would still say lach. If your shva wasn't here, you would still say at. But all it's really doing there is it's saying, just see the t as a letter. Don't put any other vowel with it. Lach, at, charat, elech, mat, mimech. So whereas they say, let's try and predict every time a shva is used, what's really happening there. My instinct is to say it's always about just allowing the letter to be heard without attaching any other vowel. But it's a little different depending on what is happening in the word. So I realize that's not a particularly helpful thing to say. But let's just see if we can get used to that sort of level of flexibility. So hello, Casey, you've joined us. We're in the middle of page 60, page 70, and we are trying to get used to this idea of the shva. Difficulty is I've got a slightly different way of thinking of the shva than the book has. But the important thing to say about the shva is that it is trying to allow the letter to be said without attaching a further vowel sound to it. So for example, here, and this is where you've unfortunately got to cross out things in your book. It's not lagoon, it's lagoon, maroon. So what it's doing here is we've got to say to ourselves, in grade 1, what did we learn? We learned that the letter L says la. The lamed says la. So you say la, lagoon. The mem says ma. You say maroon. And then you say devar, ketav, shema, machal, kalal, slach. And then in practice, what happens is that sometimes the sound of the first letter gets kind of blurred into the rest of the word, as in shema. So you don't in practice say shema. Shema is correct, Shema Yisrael. But in practice you say shema. And then kalal, the community of kalal Yisrael, but we say klal Yisrael. So really the shva works a little bit differently depending on its context. And I think rather than trying to come up with a different rule for every different time it's used, just say to yourself, the overarching story of the shva is that it must allow the letter to be heard without another vowel being attached to that letter. So when it's at the end of a word, you simply go to bach or shat. You don't say bach or shat, even though that's what the shva is doing. It's just giving you the sound of the letter. But because it's the end, you say bach, shat. And then you say lach, at, charat, elech, mat, and mimech. So I would encourage you to all think of the shva with some flexibility and depending a little on its context, rather than trying to learn the rule that the book suggests. But nonetheless, what I'll do is I'll go through all the various examples that the book uses, because what that does is it will teach us how the shva appears in its context. And that will allow me to sort of demonstrate the way that the use of the shva can actually change. So then let me go to this rather more complicated word here. It is quite a difficult word, so maybe we should rather have come back to it, but let me go through it and then we'll come back to everything. So this one has got 2 shvas in the word. And the first shva is just ending off a syllable. So it says tish. And then the next one is giving voice to the mem. Tish, ma, ru. But the first shva is just allowing you, it's like when it comes at the end of a word, it's just closing off the syllable. But you would be within your rights if you said, but it's not tishmaru, it's tishmaru. And yes, it is tishmaru. But in practice, it's just ending off a syllable. And you just say tish. So you're still using the sound of the sh, but you're not attaching any further sound to it. But here, when it's used with the mem, you do give it a bit more, because you say, what does the mem say? It says ma, tish, maru. So that word is tishmaru. The next one is,
Hello?
yes.
Hello?
Riva?
Yeah, this book is funny. Why does it say consummate? There's no oo. It's where's the
Yes,
top one?
I
Consummate.
agree. Now, to me, that says can, not con, can, mate. That's what the word says. Can, mate.
So
So
how would you pronounce it?
I don't like the way that they're trying to introduce these English words. I understand what they're trying to do is they're assuming there's no teacher in the room. So they're assuming you've got the book in front of you and you're trying to figure out what the hell this thing says by yourself.
Consummate.
Consummate. Anyway.
There's no
Yeah.
Consummate. All right. It's very confusing with
yeah,
English.
It is. And sorry, I wish I had a textbook that I really just loved, but this textbook does a good job with many things and a poor job with other things. Tish Maru. Tich Ta Bi. Yiz Ka Ru. Yish La Chu. So you see in the first word, the shva plays a different role. In the first time it's used, it's closing off the syllable. Tish, tish. And then the second time, it's allowing the mem to say its sound. What sound does a mem make? It says ma. Tish, ma, ru. That's what the word says. Similarly, tich, ta, vi. So the book says, listen here, when it's at the end of a word or at the end of a syllable, it just closes off. And then when it occurs in the middle or at the beginning, you sort of speak out the sound of the word. And that's not a bad rule of thumb. If the shva comes right at the beginning of a word or at the beginning of a syllable, then you say ta, ma, la, ka. If it comes in the middle or at the end, then, at the end of a syllable or at the end of a word, then all it's doing is it's just creating a break. So unfortunately, it does have different functions, but all I can say is it's not as scary as it seems, because in practice, you will just see. The main thing to remember is it's giving the letter space without introducing another vowel sound. So it's not Tisha Marie. Well, it's not Tishi Marie or Tishe Marie. It's just Tish Maru. Now let's just go on. Hello, Brian.
I'm turning off. I just thank you very much.
All okay then?
Yeah.
Okay, so now what they've done with these lines, which is on page 71, is they have put these shvas, the shva in all of these words in these 3 lines comes at the end of a syllable. So it creates a break. That's all it does. It's like having a break. So it's yiz kor, yich tov, yish mor, yif kod, yim loch. So you see how in each of those, it's just creating a syllable break. Similarly, on page 2, dal ti, dar chi, ar si, rag li, sal i. So you say the letter, but you just break the syllable. And similarly, mal che, kan fe, an she, av de, chas de.
Where in line 2 is the second word. I would have said darki.
Yes, darki.
Darki.
Darki. Sorry if I said it any differently. You're quite right, Rob. Darki.
Yeah, I think you said darki, and I thought maybe there is a thing that after that the ka is the cha is the all those things. Thanks.
It's darki, quite right. Sorry, I see that light is a little bit bright. Okay. Just the light other way. Okay, so then we get the sort of other case below, which is when the shva is at the beginning of the word, or it could also be at the beginning of a syllable. So peri. You all know the word peri. but you know it as pre. Bore, pre, hagafen. Bore, peri, hagafen. Shemi, bene, lechi. So all of these, you're saying out the sound of the letter. Pa, sh, ba, lechi, beli, shavi. And then some of the time it just blurs. So the word b'nai, v'shamru b'nai Yisrael, it's b'nai, but you kind of say b'nai. Or bli, you've all heard of people being bli adayim. People say he's bli. What's bli? Beli, bli. But don't worry too much about when and where and what the rule is, because you will just, as you read, as you learn to use the language, so the shva, you will see, your mind will become a little flexible about the shva. So line 2, kadosh. You say the sound of the kuf, which is ka, kadosh. Melo, meloch, shemor, yesod. Similarly, line 3, ve'or, ve'gad, ve'dor, ve'hu, ve'zeh, ve'zot. So what are you doing? You're just saying, what does a vav say? It says ve. Line 4, gedula, ketubah. What's a ketubah?
It's a marriage.
Contract.
It's a
Marriage certificate.
That's right. So we call it a
Contract.
ketubah. There it is. Ketubah. Not ketubah or kutubah. Ketubah. Kedusha. Shavua. So
Le'el,
And
have you
then-
said this already? What would it sound like if you didn't have the Shiva there?
So the problem is, so let's take the word gedola. So if you didn't have the shva there, I don't think you could say anything at all. I mean, remember in Hebrew, eventually you drop the vowel anyway. But if you're writing with vowels and you had no vowel there, you
Wouldn't
can't
you
really
just
have a
say
letter.
You'd still
Yes.
say good dollar.
Well, yes. So the shva is really just saying to you, it's okay.
Carry on.
Gedola. It's
That's
okay.
not-
There isn't a vowel there. Just say there isn't a vowel there. Just say the sound of the letter.
Okay.
So don't just say the sound of the letter. Gedola, ketuva. But once you're writing with vowels, then everything's got to have a vowel, right?
Does the blend happen, the slurring happen when it matches, in the sense that, so good, those are both banging into sounds, whereas sh and go together properly, or bull also go together properly?
No. I think you could be right. Bli. Bli. Yes, I think it must have to do it just with the ear. It must have to do just with the ear. But I'm not, let's sort of work with that and see. But the main thing to say to yourself about the shva is, when you see the shva, just look at the letter and see what the letter wants to say. Riva?
Following what was just said now, if all the vowels were written, they would never have a ka and a da next to each other with nothing, because it wouldn't make sense. Is
Yeah,
that
that's
right?
right. If you're writing with vowels, then you must write with vowels.
You've got to have that silent vowel there.
Yes, and that's what allows you to say g, ba,
Yeah,
ma,
yeah,
da.
yeah.
And Acacia says that her brain would tell her if there's no vowel, she would say the same thing anyway.
Mm.
And I
But
think
if
that is
there
right.
was
Because
no
in the end,
vowel, if there was no vowel there, Casey, there would be no vowel anywhere.
yeah,
You'd be
But-
reading the Hebrew without vowels.
that's right. And eventually you do, because eventually the vowel is superfluous.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what the shva also tells us in the end, is that in the end, you don't need the vowel, because in the end, your mind will anticipate what the vowel is saying. And you know, I mean, when I go, so I read Hebrew quite well, but when I go to Israel, I try and pick up the newspaper, I cannot read a sentence.
Why?
Right? Because there's no vowels. There's no vowels. And you look at this whole page and there's no vowels, and I'm like, wait. And then I've got to start trying to pick through and see what word I can figure out, right? There's no vowel. Yet, I think if you're in a primary school in Israel, I don't know what grade, probably by grade 5, there's no more vowel. So anyway, if we think of the vowels as being an aid, because Hebrew was probably, well, I guess all languages were oral before they were written. So there were sounds before there were letters. So what the letters are trying to do is they're trying to help you to make the sound. But really, if you're a child in Israel, by the time you're 10 years old, you don't have the vowel. But for us, what we have to remember is that, yes, if the shva wasn't there, what would happen? You would just say the sound of the letter. But sometimes that means saying g, dula, and sometimes it just means saying yish, as opposed to yish. Because according to the rule, it should be yish per 2. What's going on here is the function of that first shva, it's just a break. Yish per 2. Tim tsa'u. Shiv techa. Tiv techu. Line 2. Tish ma'u. Mish pachot. Chas decha. So rather than trying to force your brain into saying, hang on, this shva is at the end of a syllable, therefore you don't say the whole thing, you just have a break, and this one is slurred. Just say to yourself, the vowel is there to tell you that you're just working with the letter now. You're just working with the sound of the letter. Sometimes it's a longer sound, as in meh. What sound does a mem make? Meh. And sometimes you're just closing. Tish, meh, u. And yes, it's true that when it's at the beginning of a word or it's the beginning of a syllable, you say out meh, peh, che, de. Whereas if it's at the end of a syllable or at the end of a word, it's just a closing. It's just a finishing off. But I think for me, rather than trying to like force the rule into your head, I would rather just say, just work with it intuitively. So I'm going to skip this little thing here, and I'm going to come back to it. It's unfortunately wrong. So rather than explaining to you why it's wrong now, I'm just going to skip over it, and I'm going to just carry on. So here is a kind of a summary. So when the shva is at the end of a word, or indeed at the end of a syllable, it's simply a closing off of the syllable at. Yishmeru. So the first one is the closing of a syllable, and the second one is the opening of a syllable. So yish meru.
Ishmeru. Ishmeru.
This one is the closing of a syllable. So it's malche. And then if you see the shva next to another vowel, then you just say that vowel. It's very rare. But once in a while you get the e plus the shva next to it. Just ignore the shva, it's silent, right? You just say the e. Emet asher. But I wouldn't make a whole rule for it myself. So I want to go on to practicing, because I think that's what matters, rather than trying to get everything into a rule. So I want to go on to this page, which for those who have the book is the bottom of page 75. And I just want to see if people are willing to read it. It's a little bit scary because it's the first time we work with the Shva. But just see if you can read these words, which are all words from the prayer book. So who wants to try 1, 2, and 3? Let's do it that way. Riva, please.
Okay. All right, it's just hiding the, all right. Shema.
Well done.
Then do I go on to number, I'm going, sorry, I was going across. Shema, okay, sorry. Yish.
Other one?
Must I do number 6 or number 2?
No, you're quite right. Sorry, Riva. When I said the other one, I mean your second letter. What is the second letter?
Yes.
That's right. Yes.
Israel. Israel.
That's right. Israel.
Oh,
Well
I got
done.
it.
Israel. And Riva, number 3.
Go.
Mezuzah.
Mezuzah.
Mezuzah. And number 4.
So can you see, Riva, how you are just reading that Shva
Yes.
as it should be read? The Shva is more of a suggestion than it
Because
is.
if you get an inkling of what the word is,
Yeah.
it comes into your head in
That's right.
a way.
That's right. Give us number
You
4.
know, these are usual words.
That's right.
Menorah.
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 Good.
Menorah.
Right,
And
let
read
me try number 5.
because it's also a word you know.
Bracha.
Bracha.
Yes.
Bracha.
Bracha.
Yeah, bracha.
Bracha. So the Shva should be, well done, Riva, you did very well. The Shva should be thought of more as a suggestion than as like a hard and fast thing. It is a hard and fast thing. Its job is to say, it's a silent vowel, therefore just work with the letter. But sometimes you voice it out, Shema, and sometimes you close off, Yisrael. And rather than saying, but what actually is the rule? When it's here, when it's there, when it's in the middle, when it's in the beginning, when it's at the end, just say to yourself, just a suggestion. It's saying to yourself, work with the letter. There's no additional vowel sound. Work with the letter and you will soon see. So who will take on the second row going downwards from number 6?
I'll do it, Lay.
Thanks, Mom.
I got it.
Yeah.
Ma, number 6. Everybody else mute, please. Marlene, number 6.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Tzedakah.
Good. Tzedakah. Can you all see that? Tzedakah. Tzedakah.
Yerushalayim.
Well done, Ma. Yim. Long word, everybody. Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim. Good,
Yeah.
Ma. Number 8.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. L'chaim. Number 9.
Avraham.
Excellent. So you didn't say Avraham, which mechanically you would have been within your rights to say Avraham. You see, it's just closing off the syllable. Avraham.
Yeah.
Number 10.
Yitzchak.
Well done, Ma. Very nice. Very, very nice. Who's going to do line 11 and downwards?
I'll do it.
Thanks, Dad.
Right. Yaakov.
Yeah. You're right. But just say it all. Yaakov.
Yaakov. Yeah.
Good. So now the Shva here is next to another vowel, so it can be disregarded. Yaakov. Good.
Yeah.
Dad, number 12.
Mitzvah.
Good. So it's closing off after the tzadi. Mitzvah.
Simcha.
Good.
Tefillah.
Good.
Hanukkah.
Chanukah. So you see, sometimes you say it out like tefillah, and sometimes you close off a syllable, simcha. And that's the way the Shva works. And actually, you will, it will be much less confusing in practice than it is if you try and get it all into a rule. So now I'm going to read this for you, which is on page 76. And although I'll read it for you, you will soon see that you could read it for yourself. And the challenge is not just to say it off by heart, because you will know all of it. The challenge is to see how it all fits together, because now there is nothing that you cannot read. Now you can read everything. So look at this. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha Chen Vachesed V'rachamim Aleinu V'al Kol. It's one of those funny little exceptions. V'al Kol, it says Kal. Yisrael Amecha. Barchenu Avinu. Kulanu K'echad B'or Panecha. So you see what you've just done is you've just read the first paragraph of Sim Shalom. And actually, there is nothing there that you are unable to read. You can read it all. So now I want to know, does everybody here just take a minute and look at that text and tell me, can you read that Sim Shalom from the text? Is there anything there that doesn't look to you as you know it sounds, or that looks confusing, or that in any way upsets the apple cart?
The only possible one would be call.
Call. Okay, so call is one of those things. So this long vowel here that says ah, we all know it says ah, as in Shabbat. Once in a while, it says oh. And the book makes it a bit more confusing because the book claims a bit higher up here. This is where I didn't want to go into this. The book says that when it's that sound with a shva next to it, then it's oh. But actually, there are times when it is that sound with the shva next to it and it's still ah. And the other times, like the Sim Shalom, where's the Sim Shalom? Open it here. Where it doesn't have a shva next to it and it still says oh. So I don't, I think they got that rule wrong, or I don't know, they've mixed it up. But the fact is, sometimes, once in a while, and unfortunately, once in the Sim Shalom, once in the Kiddush, unfortunately it does happen that this word, that this little vowel here, ah, but it gets to be pronounced oh. And it's clearly just something that's evolved over time. So, Aleinu va'al kol Yisrael. But if you were to read it properly, mechanically, you would say kal. Anything else in the Sim Shalom first paragraph that looks difficult to you? You've got your final letters. Are you seeing that final mem? You know what the final mem is? There it is, Sim, and again, Shalom. You've got the final nun over here, Chen. You all know what Chen is. Grace. Hannah. What else have you got? You've got the shva lots of times. Here you've got a final chaf with a vowel in it. Remember we said the vowel travels upwards. Panecha. Panecha. So ladies and gents, I think I can now officially say you can read Hebrew. you can read Hebrew. And guess what? You can even read Aramaic. Watch this. Yit barach. You see that word? It's got a shva here that closes. Yit barach. And a shva here that simply ends the word. Yit barach. The. You say the out. The sound of the vowel the. Yish tabach. The. Yit pa'ar. The. Yit ro mam. The. Yit na say. The. Yit hadar. You know what you're reading now? You're reading the Kaddish in Aramaic. Lots of shvas there, hey? Here's a shva, here's a shva, here's one, two there, two here, two here. So without the shva, you can't actually read because you look at it, you're like, what is this word? With the shva, just say it yourself. Sometimes it's the, I'm saying out the sound of vav, the, and sometimes I'm closing off a syllable. So it's got those two functions. Especially at the beginning of a word or the beginning of a syllable, it allows you to say the sound of the letter. If it's in the middle, if it's in the middle of a word, in other words, the end of a syllable, or indeed the end of a word, then it's just closing off. So as in the yit. So you've just got to let your mind be a little bit flexible with the shva. And then with paragraph 3, this you will also know. You can read Hebrew. Shira chadasha. Shibchu. Geulim. Le shim cha. Al Sefat Hayam. Yachad Kulam Hodu Vehim Lichu Ve'amru. And how does that end? Adonai Yimloch Leolam Va'ed. Shira chadasha shibechu geulim leshimcha al sfat hayam yachad kulam hodu vehim lichu ve'ameru Adonai Yimloch leolam va'ed. There you see it. You can read all of it. And I'll just quickly illustrate that with number 4 and number 5. I'll do it quite quickly. But you can't read Hebrew without the shva because everywhere you look, there's a shva, especially in the prayer book. V'koneh ha-kol, v'zocher chas de avot, u-me-vi. Goel, live, ne, ne, him. And finally, the shamru. V'nei Yisrael. Eit ha-Shabbat. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. But if you had looked at that even last week and you wanted to say V'shamru, but you didn't know about the shva, what would you say? V'shamru. So I think I can now say that I now pronounce you person and wife in the sense that you can read Hebrew. that you can read Hebrew. There is no longer anything that you cannot read. You might struggle. You might say, what the hell is going on here in line 1 on the word emet? Because they put a shva next to the e. Huh? What for? No reason. The shva, you got the e. At the beginning, you look at it, it looks like 5. What are they talking? What are they doing? But actually, it's just a shva. Emet. Anachnu. At. Let me start the Adama. Ahava. Emet. Anachnu. At. So it does require a little bit of gymnastics in your mind. And that's when you now are going to go into your sort of final like transition of learning the Hebrew language, or your final stage, which is you're going to go from mechanical to reading. And reading is always mechanical up to a point. Like sometimes like on a Yom Kippur, or there'll be something, and I'll come up to a prayer that I haven't read for a long time. And I won't know it. And I'll have to like look at it carefully and do it mechanically because I don't know it. And I don't know what it says next. I've just got to work it out mechanically. But after a while, the mechanical, just as you read English, you don't read English mechanically, although you could. If there's an unfamiliar word, whatever, like they set up their consummate, you would be like, consummate. Same in Hebrew. You can always sound it out mechanically. That is how reading is done. But in time, you will just look at this word here and you'll say bracha. And if you look at it and you don't know what it says, you'll say beracha. But in time, you'll just say bracha. So I think I can now say that as for the rest of our reading lessons and career, the rest is practice. The practice is important because here's a word, number 5, himlichu. That is a difficult word. You're not just going to look at that and say, I can read it. You're going to have to sound it out. So it is very important that we practice together. And that's what we'll do from 2 weeks' time until the end of November. So I think that'll be 3 lessons. And in a way, you'll spend the rest of your sort of reading career practicing the words. But what's wonderful is, as you will see, as you pick up the Siddur now, because actually your brain already knows the sound, and now your eye can see it, the two of them will come together, and you'll be able to just flow with your reading. But once you've got the hang of the shva, and you've got the hang of the final letters, which I think you've already got, you are done. The rest is just practice. The practice is not to be taken lightly. Here's a word, the last word on line 18. Salmavet. That's a difficult word. Salmavet. It's not a word that you would just like, no, it's salmavet. No, you're going to have to figure it out. But it says salmavet. So the rest is practice. The practice is crucial, but I've got nothing more to tell you about the way Hebrew works other than to practice with you. And then you will start being able to look at words, menorah, kippah, tefillin, talit, Torah, bima, siddur, chazan, and you'll absolutely be able to read those words and know what they are. So that, ladies and gents, that's the reading of the Hebrew language. The rest is practicing and just getting your eye and your brain to work together so that it all becomes familiar. But I think I can now say that you can read Hebrew, and we will continue to learn together so that you can become a fluent reader of Hebrew and not just a mechanical reader of Hebrew. But every fluency starts off as mechanical. So don't feel you've got to jump to fluency yet, but believe me, you are now not far from fluency. And well done. Here we are.
It's Lawrence. Hi.
Lawrence, go for it, Lawrence.
First of all, my apologies. My remark about Num Num.
No apology.
No, it had no place. It had no place here.
No, I was very happy with it. No problem at all.
I didn't even hear it.
But it was gastronomic, which I thought was true. So I'm all good, Lawrence.
Sometimes it's a bit corny, but I had other things on my mind.
No.
Okay, the other thing is that on Motzei Shabbat, you spoke about the Hebrew. You said we don't have to finish anything, but we are supposed to start something, and that made an impression on me. And I'd like to know, is that in Tanakh? Where can I find the Hebrew?
Yes.
So Lawrence, it's Talmud. The Talmud, and it's the tractate of the Talmud that we all know best. In fact, it's the only one that I have any working knowledge of, and that is the Pirkei Avot. Pirkei, from the word perek.
Yeah, I'm just writing it down. Pirkei
Avot. So perek is a verse.
Avot is fathers.
The verses of.
Yeah.
Pirkei Avot, the verses of what is an av or an abba?
Avot of fathers.
Avot, or what's said in English, the ethics of the fathers.
Okay.
You know, the word ethics is not a direct translation because it's verses, and then avot, it is a male word, but we are not really talking here only about men. So really what it is it is a received wisdom. And the point of the Pirkei Avot is its discussions between the rabbis about not so much technical stuff, but about ethical things. That's why it's called the ethics of the fathers. So it's about like the meaning of life. That's really what it is, and it's just a wonderful part of the Talmud. I'll tell you now which verse it is in the Talmud. But Reva, please go on. Oh, well done. Well done.
A funny question.
Okay.
Is there anywhere in Pirkei Avot that the discussion is in the voice of a female? So can we say the ethics of our mothers and for our fathers and mothers?
No, because what these are is they actually are discussions. They are records of discussions. And who are the discussions?
Yes, I know that. I know that.
They're between the rabbis.
There's no record. Yeah, and at that stage, of course, the woman wasn't allowed to be one. But I just thought that even the rabbis themselves might have referred to, for example, Ruth, or might have referred to something.
Yes, it's a good question, Reva. It's a good question.
It brings a woman matriarch in.
So the rabbinic period in particular in Jewish life, the rabbinic period of Jewish life is incredibly male dominated. And you know what they used to say? They used to say the greatest thing that a woman can do is to work and earn money so that her husband can study Talmud all day.
Yes, I know. I know that, and I know it was written in an era where women definitely were chattels or second-class citizens. However, throughout Torah, we have the exceptions in every way to what was the rule. There's no doubt. For example, Deborah, exactly, was a judge. And to lead people into battle. For example, the rule of the first son was broken. So Torah deliberately breaks hard and fast rules that will in the future anyway become unequal. So I just thought in this ethic somewhere they might have mentioned Deborah, or might have mentioned Ruth, or might have mentioned something. That's all.
Question, sadly not. So Lo Alecha is Pirkei Avot chapter 2 verse 16.
Marian actually sent it out on WhatsApp the other day for us all. Marian,
goodness, I did.
Maybe you could send it to Lawrence.
And
I did.
He's just posted the Sefaria link. So, and you know what? If you have a little bit of time in your day, and you have an internet connection, or you have a book of the Pirkei Avot, it is a wonderful thing to sit and read the Pirkei Avot.
Yeah,
there are parts where it becomes very convoluted, and there's a whole discussion about what happens when you see, if you see a skull floating on the water, what does it mean? So it does go off at tangents, the Pirkei Avot, but most of the Pirkei Avot is very accessible. And that's, for example, where we get the famous Hillel, Im ein ani li mili. If I'm not for myself, then who will be for me? So that's all Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot is accessible. It's got to do with the meaning of life, and it's actually really quite wonderful.
Lael,
There's
can I
actually
just
one
share?
funny one that says something about if your talus is up in the tree, can you climb the tree to get it on a Saturday?
Lael,
also
I
answer.
had one thing. There's such a
No,
lot
no.
of beautiful messages in there. And I'll just give you one example that I use very often. It says, who is honored? And the answer is he who honors others. And they're beautiful things like that.
That's right. And in fact, that particular one is part of a series of questions and answers. So who is happy? Who is happy? Anyone remember the answer? Who is happy?
The one who
Anyone
is
who is
content
satisfied
with his
with
lot.
his lot.
That's right, Reva. Who is happy? The person who is content with their lot.
Yeah.
But because you can be Elon Musk, who I'm told is now the richest person in the world. He's what is he, a trillionaire or something? But he might not be happy. Whereas you might find a person of modest means, but who is happy with their lot, who is not fighting all the time and saying, I wish I had a different car. They just say, wonderful to have a car.
He was
It's a
not
wonderful
happy
to have
when
a
his
meal.
wife turned into a pillar of salt.
Yeah.
So that's the Pekavot. And that's the reading of Hebrew, ladies and gents. You've all done very well. And all I can say is the practicing is not to be trivialized, because you've still got to get from the mechanical to the fluent. But on the mechanical side, you are pretty much done.
You have to practice, practice, practice.
You really do.
We'll practice with Lael in the lessons.
And thanks for being so patient with us and such a great teacher.
Thank you, Robs.
It's not enough. I'll
Thanks.
give you an
Thank you
example.
so much, Lael.
Thanks,
Hope you have a
Lael.
wonderful holiday hike.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. We'll see you, please, God, in 2 weeks' time.
Boy,
Yeah,
are
I
you
would
going to
say
be
that
fit?
we've done a
Wow.
lot. You have done a lot
I
for
hope
us.
so.
Thank you.
Lots of
Enjoy
love,
and be
everybody.
safe.
Lael,
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Lots of love.
bye.
Shavua tov.
Right. Lael, Reva, a lot of the things you just get to know. You don't, I don't know all the rules with the Sheva. I just know how the word is pronounced. I don't actually.
There you go. You don't need it. It's wonderful.
No, I just know how it's pronounced. I don't think
Exactly.
about it.
Brian, that's through years and years of practice. When you and Serona did all the services, and I just came in with the Torah and the drushes. It goes back years. As Lael says, that's just practice.
And Benny helped me
It's
a lot.
better than knowing.
Because a child doesn't learn rules, he just knows.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Brian, darling. And we'll see you and everyone on Tuesday. We're going to be doing the Haftalah ourselves first.
Thank you.
And
I'm sorry,
we'll all
late.
be-
I was a little later.
that's all right, my love. That's all right. Thank you, Brian, darling. Shavua tov. Shavua tov, Jacob.
Shavua tov.
Oh, everyone's gone. And there you are. Are you there still? Okay.
Yeah.
Shavua tov, Jacob.
That's all.
Shavua tov, Serona.
That's all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Brian. See you Tuesday. See you Friday night. See you Saturday morning and see you Saturday afternoon. We better